Well, I saw someone wearing a scriptural t-shirt the other day. Sometimes I don't necessarily appreciate the scripture t-shirts that I see wearing, but the other day I appreciated one that is based on the gospel lesson that Emma shared with us today. It said, "Be salty, be lit." Be salty, be lit. And since this is Super Bowl Sunday, I think it's a great day to talk about salt. Don't tell my cardiologist, but I kind of like salt, and I kind of like to be salty. And the reason my voice is like this is because I spent a few days with my college roommates, and I wasn't very quiet. So did you hear the one about the guy who was addicted to eating salt? Don't worry, he was cured. In which state is the Great Salt Lake? Liquid. In which state is the Great Salt Lake liquid? Why is there a ring of salt around the rim of a margarita glass? To keep the spirits from escaping. And one more. What happens when you mix Diet Coke, baking soda, table salt, and bleach together in a mop bucket? They call the manager at Walmart. Be salty. Oh, please, be salty and be lit. You are salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. The light imagery is one that we use often. We hear about a lot of light in our faith tradition. During Advent, during Epiphany, when the wise ones follow the star, during the Transfiguration, when it's so bright, Jesus there on the mountaintop with the others from our story of the Hebrew people and the prophets. They're so overwhelmed they can't see it all. And then Easter morning, the great light that would not be contained. What we don't hear a lot about is salt. There's a lot of light, but not so much salt. But really, salt is everywhere. It's in us, and it's around us. And we already mentioned that today in particular. This is probably the day that more salt is consumed in the United States than any other day. So I want to talk a little bit about salt, but I don't want to ignore light. So just a little bit of light for a couple of minutes. Yesterday, I was fortunate enough to spend time at the National Museum of African American Music. The National Museum of African American Music in Nashville, Tennessee. They're celebrating their 5th year in existence. And because it's Black History Month and they're celebrating their 5th year, we happened upon a great celebration yesterday at this museum. And it was good and important on the first Sunday of Black History Month for us to spend some time remembering the story of people that we love and people that we know and people that we cherish in our American landscape. And we remember the stories of freedom and also the stories of pain and people who have not been free and who continue to long for freedom. And so, of course, the beginning of this museum talks about Africa, where this all began, the African American music. And it talked a great deal about how music and dance is woven through everything, and how there's a call and a response often in music and in dancing. And it's about relationship, and it's about community, and it's about being in it with each other. It's about sharing our light with each other and sharing our salt with each other. And there were all kinds of things dancing through my mind and body and spirit and relationships as I walked through that museum, as I walked through the history and the changes and the steady beats that were familiar and sturdy and strong throughout. Beats that were about expression, beats that were about emotion, beats through the music that were about the steadiness that is underneath and the things that maybe carry us when we're feeling like we can't walk, we can't move forward, We can't make our own decisions, and that circumstances have become so heavy upon us. And there were some ideas and some images and some words. I kept thinking people probably think I'm on my phone, but I was writing so many things down and taking pictures of so many things because they said, please take pictures. And all through this museum, there were stages where you put on headphones and you could listen to all kinds of music and see some of the through lines and some of the inspirations that people had from other times and places. And you had this little wristband that if you really liked a song, you could hit your wristband against the machine and it would record it for you. And then right after we left the perimeter of the building, we got an email that had downloaded all of the songs that were meaningful to us as we walked through the museum. And so those songs will be able to stay with me. They'll probably disappear at some point, but I have them for a little while and I look forward to reading them. And I came away from the museum again feeling the heaviness of the African American journey, but also feeling incredible joy and perseverance and resistance and the idea that we can make it through, that we can find courage and strength and solidarity, that we can find partners for this journey that is sometimes very difficult. I mentioned this book a little bit earlier. I didn't tell them that my bookmark is Girl Scout cookies and the descriptions of each one. And I didn't quite show them that I also have a New England uniform on because I have a Patriots tie on. But I want to let you know that when I finish this, which will probably be sometime next week, I'm happy to let anyone that wants to borrow it. Again, it was a gift from Taysam, our Muslim friends from the Turkish American Society of Missouri, because this young man grew up with the same spirit and the same salt that our friends from Taysam grew up with as they faced incredible hardships in Turkey, dreaming of freedom, dreaming of free speech, dreaming of belonging, dreaming of so many things that so many people dream about and strive for. And we need to help each other continually find those things. I'm reading another book too. I don't know if you're like me, you have several books going. This one's called A Race is a Nice Thing to Have. A Race is a Nice Thing to Have. The subtitle is A Guide to Being a White Person or Understanding the White Persons in Your Life. It's by Janet Helms, and it's sort of a step 2 or chapter 2 of witnessing whiteness. And I want to shout out to all the people in this congregation who are part of this round of witnessing whiteness, having those conversations on Zoom, facilitated by some trained people, and trying to figure out what all of this might mean for you as an individual and for us as a community. One of the questions that is on our minds as we move through this book is, what is it about being white that gives you pride? What is it about being white that gives you pride? I just saw 5 of you grimace. It's a really interesting question. What is it about being white, that identity of being white, that brings you pride? Maybe we'll talk about that another day. But here is the idea that I came out of the Museum of African American Music with. This little light that we have to let it shine. This little light of ours, we can't hide it under a bushel. This little light of ours, we can't let anyone blow it out. And do you remember what often the next verse is? All around the world, I'm going to let it shine. So in our gospel lesson today, there is that conversation about light, and there's that conversation about salt. And then what happens is Jesus says that you need to keep it going. That to follow these commands means that you will be blessed. And then if you teach these commands, you will be blessed. So it's not enough to have this light and to have this salt and keep it to ourselves. But we have to find ways to share it abundantly with others. And so what do we know about salt? Because we know a lot about light. Salt brings out the flavor. We hear that salt brings out the flavors that are already there. Sometimes tastes, sometimes flavors are muted, and you need to bring them out. You don't want to just blend them all together, but you want to kind of experience different spices and different tastes. When you go to a new place, you often try new foods because you're excited about being there with people and wondering what it is that they do, what gives them belonging, what gives them nurture. We have done a lot of work with an exchange student program, and some of you have as well, AFS. They're under great duress, as a lot of American exchange programs are, because of some of the decisions that are being made in Washington about funding. And so one of the things that AFS is going to do next year is work with students within the United States, because so many of the young people from around the world are not going to be able to come because they're not allowed to come. They're not being granted visas. And so one of the things AFS is doing is they're going to gather some groups in Chicago to have culinary diplomacy. So they're going to learn about all kinds of cultures in Chicago through the foods that are made and served in Chicago by people who grew up with those foods and those spices and those traditions and that music and that flavor. And so they're not going to let their light be diminished. They're not going to become saltless. They're shifting, they're changing how they're doing their work. They are adapting because they know that the way that they have shared light, the way that they have shared salt in the past is no longer allowed. And so they're going to stay loud and do it differently through other senses and through the people who are already here. So salt preserves, right? So before there was refrigeration, there was salt that kept things the way they were. If you grew up around salt water, you know that salt water can sting. You might not even realize that you have some open sore, and suddenly you feel it when the salt water comes to you. And that salt water, though, even though it stings, it cleanses, and it helps you to root out the things that you don't need. Salt water is almost like justice, coming in and making difference and changing the scenario and changing the formula. And I heard a rumor this winter that salt melts ice. Salt creates thirst, right? I'm a living example of that right now. Salt creates thirst, and so we hunger and thirst for things that will complete us, will refresh us, will restore us. And so salt reminds us of how important it is to seek after refreshment and to be that kind of place for each other, to be an oasis for people who are seeking things that they need, seeking things that they don't even know are possible. In Scripture, salt marks covenant. And so there are times when people in the Scriptures seal a deal with salt because they believe that salt is enduring, salt lasts, and that we already talked about how salt makes a difference, and salt can seal, and salt can protect. And yet, sometimes salt disappears into the whole. If you add just a little bit of salt and you mix it in, you might not taste it, but it helps you to taste all of it. That it's something that brings things together. So Jesus says you are salt. Jesus says you are the light of the world. There's a sense of the long haul. Salt is one of the things that lasts and lasts and lasts. I don't know if there's even an expiration date on the salt that you have in your house, but salt lasts, and it is enduring, and it is something we shouldn't lose. And light is urgent. Light can go out very quickly. We talk a lot about light in this sanctuary. We have a candle lit over there. We have our candles here. We think often about Christmas Eve when we share the light. None of us has light that is diminished when we share our light with each other, when suddenly the room becomes full of that candlelight when we make our shalom circle on Christmas Eve. And so there's a sense of urgency and there's a sense of long haul, because the work we're called to do, the commands that the Holy gives us for ourselves and to teach and share with each other, are not just for this moment, and we can't tire out. We can't peter out. We can't give up. We can't get too frustrated. We need to find new ways. We need to find new partners. We need to find new spice and zest for this work. And so we want to remind you that sometimes light flickers and sometimes light takes over, and there's seemingly no darkness at all. And sometimes the salt is just a little bit, just a little grain, and at other times it gathers together and it will not be ignored. It will not be denied. And so we have an opportunity, as Jesus speaks to us directly today, to remind us of the things that we already are, of the things of light and the things of salt. Please pray with us. Holy One, sometimes we are unsure about who we are or who you want or need us to be. And so thank you for the clarity today when we are reminded that we are light and we are salt. Help us to be salty and to be lit, and to know that you will not leave us in those places alone, but you are with us, reminding us and giving us the resources and the strength that we need to be there for each other and the stranger, to find ways to bring about the things that you command, namely to love and to listen and to belong. So send us out into places that maybe we have not been before, to say and do things that maybe we have not done or said before. Give us courage, give us wisdom, give us insight and joy as we do this work, and help us to feel your steady drumbeat beneath it all, weaving it all together, helping us to be sturdy and salty and bright. Amen.